Hi, hello, and welcome back. Or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Heather, and as usual, I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Miss Finn. And this is the third video in my series of undergoing treatment with Spravato. If you haven't seen my first two videos, I highly suggest you check those out, and I'll put a link to those in the description. For those of you who haven't seen them yet, a little bit of background on me. I've had depression for over 20 years, and I've tried just about every antidepressant there is without any kind of meaningful improvement, so I've been diagnosed with treatment-resistant depression. Spravato, or esketamine, is an FDA-approved treatment for treatment-resistant depression. It is a dissociative anesthetic, meaning it causes dissociation, and I also have a dissociative disorder. Before I started treatment, I had a really hard time finding firsthand accounts from people who have undergone this treatment and couldn't find any from people who also have a dissociative disorder. So in this series, I share my experience of undergoing treatment in as much detail as I can, as well as some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. I thought it might be helpful to start compiling a list of these tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, but before I share them, I have a disclaimer. I am not a mental health or medical professional of any kind. These are all just my own experiences and opinions as a regular person undergoing this treatment. Also, my experiences could be totally unique to me. I don't know. Haven't heard many firsthand accounts yet, so just keep that in mind. Here are my tips so far. Number 1, prepare your mind and body before the treatment begins, with the goal to be in a calm or at least positive state of mind. I learned during my second and fourth treatment that going into it with any kind of stress or anxiety seems to really negatively affect the experience of the treatment. I don't know if it impacts the effectiveness of the treatment, but it definitely seems to affect the experience. Number 2, have a playlist that's at least an hour and a half long of breathing exercises, guided meditations, soothing music, or whatever will keep you in a calm, relaxed state during treatment. Or you can try out my own tried and true playlist. Link is in the description. Number 3, wear comfortable clothing that will also keep your body at a comfortable temperature. I haven't gotten too hot yet, but I found that getting cold is really distracting. Number 4, food. You're not allowed to have any food in the 2 hours prior to treatment, so I recommend that you either eat a light meal before then, or bring something with you that is nutritious and ready to eat immediately after treatment. So far, I've been doing treatment at 10 a.m., so by noon, when I can eat, I am starving, and I've opted for readily available garbage on a few occasions. Do yourself and your brain a favor by having something nutritious and ready to eat as soon as you're done with treatment. Number 5, spend the rest of the day doing things that will keep you in a positive state of mind, whatever that means for you. Maybe that means staying off of social media. For me, it's avoiding news, politics, and true crime content. One of the effects of chronic or untreated depression is that it shrinks the hippocampus by as much as 20%. What's so great about Spravato is that it seems to have a growth-promoting effect. So help your brain out while it's trying to regrow that critical part of your brain. Just keep it light, fun, and positive. But that's it for the tips and tricks so far. Let's move on to the treatments. I've noticed that I start getting real chatty as it's taking effect. This time, after the third dose, I was able to continue having a conversation for a few minutes, or at least until the nurse left. I don't know if that's because of spacing them out, or if I'm just starting to build up a tolerance to the medication, but it was not as intense as it's been the last few times at the maximum dose. Once the nurse who administers the medication or hands me the nasal spray devices left, I put my AirPods in, put an eye mask on, and kicked back and just waited for taking off in the plane. For those of you who haven't seen my first two videos, I had a pretty unpleasant experience my first time at the maximum dose. Thankfully, for my second time at the maximum dose, I had a wonderful nurse who played these specific videos, and it totally changed my experience. The playlist starts with a breathing exercise with an audible inhale and exhale sound, which I find very grounding, and that's really important when things are really starting to get going. It's like hanging on to an anchor as you get hit by a tornado. It keeps me from getting overwhelmed or having anxiety or even a panic attack, which, like I said, is very important for your overall experience of the treatment. The second one is Stone Flake on a Lake, which really helps to relax my body. And the third one is a guided meditation that continues with breathing exercises and also provides really great visualizations that both ground me and also help me to let go and put me in a good headspace for the rest of the treatment. So by the time my music starts, roughly 15 minutes later, I am very calm and relaxed. I tried an eye mask for the first time during my last treatment, but that treatment didn't go so well for totally unrelated reasons. I thought it would help me because sometimes I really struggle to keep my eyes closed. Like literally my eyelids will keep fluttering open and I cannot make it stop. Always messes up meditation for me. So I tried the eye mask again and pretty quickly took it off. What I found is that with all the light blocked out, I felt very alone. Like I was just in the vacuum of space and alone with my thoughts, which for me is not very calming. And it was kind of boring, to be honest. So I took the mask off and closed my eyes and turned my face toward the sun that was coming in through the window. And this had a very positive effect. This is just a theory, but I think that having that little bit of light coming in stimulates my brain and gives it something to do. Because instead of seeing the kaleidoscope of colors or whatever it is you see with your eyes closed, those colors kept morphing into things. I'll elaborate on that in a bit. Going into this treatment, I was very eager and excited to go somewhere else, like I had during my third treatment. I didn't realize it at first, but I think that mentally I was trying to force or forge an experience, and it wasn't really working. But then I remembered that during my third treatment, the nurse said I should try to fall asleep, and how that totally set things off in a positive direction. Once I remembered that and shifted gears to allow myself to fall asleep, I quickly hit what I'm calling the sweet spot. What is the sweet spot? You know how when your alarm goes off in the morning and you hit the snooze button and your bed has never been comfier and you just kind of doze off, maybe dream a little until your alarm goes off again? Feels a lot like that. Maybe this is just my experience, but Spravato seems to keep me in that state. And it also blocks out the constant stream of thoughts and anxieties that are normally on a constant loop in my brain. So I hit the sweet spot and let go and just allowed myself to witness whatever came up instead of trying to conjure it. Before I talk about what I saw, I want to try a little exercise with you that I hope will help to illustrate what the experience is like and what I mean when I say that I see things. For the first exercise, I want you to close your eyes right now and ideally face toward the sun or some kind of light source. Now, keeping your eyes closed, what do you see? A lot of nothing, right? Not total darkness, but not really anything either. I don't know, translucent colors. Okay, open your eyes. Imagine those translucent colors moving like they're raindrops on water. Very clearly defined burst of colors that bleed into each other. Now imagine those translucent raindrops on water continuously turning into things that you can gently direct your attention toward and kind of get pulled into, or they expand until they take up that whole space of whatever it is you see with your eyes closed. Are you following me? Well, if not, I got one more exercise to try. So if you haven't already, go ahead and close your eyes again, and I want you to picture a chair in as much detail as you can. What kind of chair is it? An office chair? A wooden chair? A rocking chair? An armchair? What color is it? What material is it made of? Does it have any kind of distinguishing marks? Is it adult-sized? Child-sized? Doll-sized? Giant? Okay, open your eyes. Now you've got a pretty good idea of what that chair looks like, right? Now, very quickly, bring that chair up again in your mind and note all of the details about the space that chair is in. If this exercise is going the way I hope it is, you're having to kind of ponder and focus on the details as you create them, because you are creating them. And as you pictured the chair, you were still aware of you and the room you're in and what you were doing, but you were also seeing a chair. Okay, exercise is over. Go ahead and open your eyes if you haven't already. With Spravato, when I close my eyes, that chair is just there. And not only is there a chair, but that chair is in a fully detailed space that I can see clearly without having to construct any of it. It's all just there. When I talk about the things I see, that's the kind of experience I'm referring to. The reason why I include what I saw in these videos is because prior to treatment, I was very curious as to what people experience during it. If you find it boring and unnecessary, I apologize. These are just the kinds of things I wanted to know about when I was looking for firsthand experiences. Okay, so what I saw. At first, those translucent color raindrops turned into scenes of clouds, and I was climbing in elevation until I was high enough to where I could see the curvature of the earth. And as I was up there, I would just look at a cloud and kind of get pulled into it, and it would morph into a different scene of clouds. Now, mind you, this isn't static in any way. Like, it is all very clearly defined. And as I did this, I felt like I was kind of tumbling and turning upside down, but it wasn't jarring or disorienting in any way. It was totally effortless, and it felt kind of good. Like my brain was stretching, and it felt more like I was just letting go and going with the flow rather than clinging or trying to hang on. It was all very reminiscent of Doctor Strange. And this is how it was for a while, just different vast expanses of clouds, to where I started to think, okay, I guess all I'm going to see is clouds this time, but all right. Occasionally, I would end up low enough in the clouds to where I could see the ground below. And at first, it looked like I was over Sedona, Arizona. I have been there before, and I did a helicopter tour of the rocks, so that's probably where that was coming from. So I'm in the clouds and looking down at the rocks, and I see a man standing on top of one of them with his arms stretched out. But before I got closer or saw anything more about him, I went tumbling again, and then I was looking down at a desert. At first it was from up high, and then up close, to where I could see all the ridges in the sand and little bits of sand getting picked up in the wind. And then I was back in the sky and looking down at what appeared to be a Middle Eastern town. And then I zoomed in even more onto a woman walking down some stairs. She was very pretty. And then I was back in the sky, and these geometric, square-like pillars went jutting out alongside me and became very detailed components of what appeared to be a UFO or UAP, something like that. And I recall really staring at it and asking myself, like, is it really that detailed, or do I just think it is? And no, it really was. It was that detailed. And then I went tumbling again and spiraled into a different scene where I appeared to be in a temple of some sort, and I was really up close to a golden statue of a boar. And what was really interesting to me about this was that I wasn't directing the movements. Like, I was very aware that someone or something else was directing things as we moved from being at basically its rib cage all the way up to its tusks. And then the scene morphed again, and I was in a space that looked like something out of Dune. It had stone walls and little slits in the side that allowed light to come in, and there was about 3 inches of water covering the ground. And ahead of me, there were 2 men wearing these white robes and headdresses, and they were walking away from me. And as I slowly moved through this space, a woman, also wearing white, went past my right side, but I wasn't really paying much attention to her. By this point, it had been about 30 minutes, and I noticed that my feet were really cold. I had on 2 pairs of socks, but the AC was blowing on me. So, like I said, make sure you're wearing enough clothing to be comfortable, because getting cold is very distracting. And I started noticing regular thoughts popping up in my head, like, my feet are cold. I can't wait to eat something after this. And is it time to take my blood pressure yet? As long as I kept my eyes closed, I could stay in the sweet spot, but the thoughts were getting louder. I wasn't seeing things as vividly anymore, and I noticed that it was darker, so I opened my eyes, and the sun had moved, and it wasn't shining on my face anymore. So I repositioned, and then boom, right back into the clouds and over towns and moving through the multiverse. This is why I recommend not wearing an eye mask if you find yourself in the vacuum during treatment. Not too long after that, it was time to take my blood pressure for the second time.
He looks all right to me.
I kept laying there with my eyes closed in that sublime, almost dozing off state, just very relaxed and enjoying the relaxation. 30 minutes later, it was time to take my blood pressure again, and I realized I had to use the bathroom, so I got up and did that. Oh, by the way, that wonderful smelling hand soap is Mrs. Meyer's lavender soap. Definitely recommend picking that up. After I went to the bathroom, I went back in the room and sat in the chair, and I realized that the way that I feel toward the end of treatment is a lot like how I feel when I've just woken up from a deep sleep, and I'm just trying to wake up, but my body isn't really getting with the program. And that's how I feel for about an hour after I leave the clinic. And then gradually over the course of about 2 to 3 hours, my mind and my body become fully awake and alert. Interesting side note. On the way home from treatment, I was still a little loopy. And it was a warm, bright, sunshiny day, which I never take for granted in the Pacific Northwest. But anyway, I was staring out the window at a plane that was flying overhead, and it was leaving a contrail behind it. And as I was watching it, I started to see something going straight out from the plane. Just some barely perceptible beam that followed the trajectory it was on and stretched out as far as I could see. As I continued watching it, the beam became much more noticeable until it was a dark, clearly visible beam coming straight out from the plane. And I thought, oh my God, I'm really tripping right now. But I could see it, clear as day. So finally I asked my boyfriend, like, hey, do you see that beam looking thing coming from the plane? And he did. It wasn't in my head. So I Googled it. Once I sorted through all of the conspiracy theories about what that could be, I finally figured out what it was. Turns out it was a volumetric edge shadow being cast by the contrail. Just a weird bit of information for you. Once I got home, I just had a normal rest of the day, and after about 2 hours, I felt totally back to normal, but I still waited the full 3 hours before taking my dose of Adderall. Still haven't had any noticeable difference in my mood, although I still feel slightly less terrible every second of the day like I have for years. I have noticed one change, and I'm not sure if this is tied to Spravato, but I suspect that it is. For the better part of a year now, after my second dose of Adderall has worn off, I am useless. I can't concentrate on anything. I can't think clearly. And I struggled to do just basic activities or regular everyday tasks. And that is a symptom of depression, by the way. Well, what I've noticed over the last week and a half is that after my second dose of Adderall has worn off, I can still kind of do things. Like, I can still sustain a bit of concentration and can still do everyday tasks. So I think that is tied to Spravato. Even though I don't notice a difference in my mood, it seems like that symptom of depression is getting noticeably better. Treatment number 6 was all right. Wasn't as fun as number 5. I really hope this isn't an ongoing pattern where I have one treatment that's really great and then one that's not so great. Everything was fine going into treatment. Wasn't stressed out, didn't have any anxiety, but when they took my blood pressure, my pulse was 101. That's not normal for me. So of course, my health anxiety kicked in. Oh my God, what's wrong with my heart? Am I gonna have a heart attack if I do the treatment? Am I gonna have a stroke? Just ridiculous shit that I know isn't the case, but to my brain, it doesn't matter. Because it was so high, we waited a few minutes and then she took it again. 103. Now I was having anxiety, so of course it's going to be higher. So we waited for a few more minutes and then the nurse came in and we chatted a little bit and then she took my pulse manually. It was 98. Still higher than normal before treatment, but it was fine to continue with treatment. Having a nurse there while I do treatment really helps my health anxiety, but doesn't make it go away. Anyway, as we were just hanging out and she was giving me the doses, we chatted about weekend plans and I was making sure to keep my breathing in check and just try and stay calm. And I thought I was doing a good job. Sometimes in the moments before I have a full-blown panic attack, I swear I can sense my amygdala just inching toward the panic button. And if I don't play my cards right, it's going to hit that button and send me off into a panic attack. By the time I'd had my third dose, I was far less anxious and I knew that everything was going to be okay. But as I was doing my breathing exercises and guided meditation, I could sense there was still part of my brain that was very hypervigilant and evaluating every little sensation I had. And then I started having anxiety about having anxiety during my treatment, and it just kind of all built on itself. I didn't have a panic attack, but I had a little bit of anxiety. It wasn't a bad experience, and I was able to relax my body and calm down, but I think because part of my brain was being so hypervigilant, I couldn't fully relax and just let my mind go. I did experience a little bit of interdimensional tumbling. I saw a lot of little short scenes of what appeared to be ancient Egyptian things, sarcophagi, pyramids, sand, etc., and Timothy Chalamet for some reason. The effects of the medication didn't clear up as quickly as it has in the past when I've had anxiety, and I was almost in the sweet spot. But rather than being in that blissful in-between snooze button state, I was in that state where you're awake in bed in the morning and are maybe trying to fall back asleep, but your mind keeps thinking of all of the things you need to do that day, and eventually you just resign to, okay, I guess I'm up now. And that was pretty much it for number 6. After we left the clinic, we started heading toward the coast because it was sunny and warm, and given that it's mid-September in the Pacific Northwest, it was likely going to be the last nice weather we're going to have until June. I've been dreading the end of summer since summer began, and I try to soak up as much of it as I can. Unfortunately, about an hour into our 2-hour drive, we hit all the smoke from the wildfires, and it just kept getting thicker and the air quality was getting worse. So eventually we just turned around. The smoke was so thick that it just looked like a typical gray overcast day. And even though it was still 90 degrees, the air quality was so poor that we had to keep the windows rolled up. And because it was still 90 degrees, we had to keep the AC on. So my eyes and nose and throat were burning pretty badly. It just wasn't very nice. So now I'm looking forward to the other thing I no longer take for granted each year, and that's having clean air to breathe. Do you remember when years ago there was that guy who started selling bottled or canned air in China and how ridiculous that sounded? I think of that during every wildfire season and wish that I had some. In case you didn't notice, my depression score is down 2 points from last week and 3 points from when I started treatment. And I'm down 13 points from where I was a year and a half ago before I started TMS. Over 15 years on antidepressants and continuously cycling in and out of moderate to severe life-threatening depression. And after one course of TMS and 5 treatments with Spravato, my depression score has more than halved. For me, it took a year and a half, but it could have happened sooner. I did TMS from the beginning of February 2021 to mid to late May of 2021. And by the end of treatment, my depression symptoms were significantly better. Before I started TMS, my depression score was 24 out of 27. And by my last treatment, I believe it was 14 out of 27. Somewhere around there. I was fine that whole summer and even into fall, and I thought, wow, TMS really worked. And I believe that it did. But in hindsight, I think that part of my perceived improvement was due to the fact that I ended treatment at the beginning of the summer. I've mentioned before that I live in the Pacific Northwest and I have severe seasonal depression. I recall that back in December of 2021, my anxiety suddenly shot through the roof for no apparent reason. In case you didn't know, depression and anxiety often go hand in hand. Because there was no discernible reason for why my anxiety got so bad, I suspect, though I'm not certain, that my anxiety worsened because of my seasonal depression, which by December was in full swing. At the time, I didn't make that possible connection between my anxiety and depression, so I didn't do anything about it. Although, to be honest, I'm not sure there's much I could do because I'm already in therapy and on antidepressants, and I can't take benzos anymore. Story for another time. In June of this year, 2022, I started working on an episode of Nice People about depression, which is almost done. My progress has just been slowed due to having Spravato twice a week and then filming and editing these videos, but it's almost done. Anyway, in researching for that video, I was refamiliarized with all of the symptoms of depression. Because I've had treatment-resistant depression for so long, it's gone from being a temporary illness to just the way that I am for as long as I can remember, to where I only really noticed or measured the severity of my depression by how severe my suicidal thoughts were. But depressed mood and suicidal thoughts are just 2 of the 9 symptoms of depression. 2. This year, we didn't get any sun or even above like 60 degrees until the first week of July. By that point, I'd had seasonal depression for 7 to 8 months. But because I wasn't really having thoughts, except for with my PMDD, I didn't realize just how bad it had become. I was really struggling with fatigue and finding the motivation to do even basic activities. And even though I take Adderall for my ADHD, I was still really struggling with concentration, thinking clearly, making decisions, and performing everyday tasks, which are all symptoms of depression. These all worsened gradually over time, so I didn't really notice how bad it had become. Once I was reminded of all the symptoms of depression and realized just how bad mine still was, I reached out to the TMS clinic, who also does Spravato, and scheduled a consultation. And 2 months later, I began treatment. What was the point of me telling you all this? Oh, right. So it's taken me a year and a half to go from 24 out of 27 down to 11 out of 27, but it didn't have to take that long. If I had finished TMS in the fall or winter, it probably would have been much more apparent to me just how bad my depression still was, and I likely would have started Spravato a lot sooner. Oh, hi, Finn. It's now mid-September, so we're heading into sad weather territory, so we'll see how that goes. I have started taking a vitamin D supplement, and I'm going to look into doing light therapy. Maybe I'll try hitting up a tanning salon, which I haven't tried before, but I worked at one years ago, and we had tons of clients who were prescribed tanning for depression. I don't know. We'll see. I think that does it for now. As always, if you have any questions for me about Spravato, depression, anxiety, Miss Finn, or anything really, please feel free to leave those in the comments and I will respond to them. I've really appreciated the handful of comments I've received so far. Angie, Caroline, Sherry, and Phil, I'm looking at you. It's really encouraging and motivating for me to know that as I'm making these videos, I'm not just speaking into the void, that you guys are out there watching them and hopefully getting something out of it. If you liked this video or found it helpful in any way, please consider liking it, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to keep receiving these updates from me. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so that you'll know as soon as I do post another video. And with that, I hope you have a great week, and I'll be seeing you next week. Bye.